Hello, everybody. We're back. I missed the Piotr Jan Davison Figueiredo card. I was sick as fuck. I had like no voice. Basically, I was down in the shitters for a couple of weeks. So I didn't upload a prediction video for that card. To be honest with you, I missed most of the card. I think it was on at like 3 a.m. I did catch the Olberg fight and Uzdemir, and then the main event between Piotr Jan and Davison. Honestly, I only did two picks. It was those two fights. I did pick Olberg, and I also did pick Piotr Jan, but outside of that, I didn't pick any of the rest of the fights on the card just because I was sick, and I was like, fuck this, man. And most of the card wasn't all that great anyway, to be honest with you, as far as like name value goes. So I missed out on that, but I am back for UFC 310 this week, or not, this Saturday, which is between Pantoja and Kai Asakura. Kai Asakura making his UFC debut, fighting right off the bat for the flyweight title. This is actually a pretty good card, so let's break this motherfucker down. The first fight of the night, hold up, let me go full screen here so I can see what the fuck I'm doing. Alright, first fight of the night is between Kennedy Njoku versus Lucas Brzeski. I'm going Njoku right off the bat. To be honest with you, Brzeski is ass. The fact that he beat Johnny Walker's brother, Walter Walker, is kind of a fucking miracle. I also kind of thought he lost that fight. I thought he got gifted, but either way, Brzeski, not that good. Njoku, much better fighter, former 205er. He just fought recently against Chris Barnett. Barnett got injured in the first round. Wasn't much of a fight. It was kind of hard to gauge where he was, skill-wise and how he matches up with some of these heavyweights, but Njoku's a better fighter, man. He just is. I think he should win this fight pretty easily. He'll probably get a stoppage at some point. So I'm going to go Kennedy Njoku by TKO. Let's go second round. I think Brzeski's tough enough he could probably extend it to the second round, but I just think Njoku's better everywhere this fight goes. To be honest, I think he's better on the feet. I think he's better on the ground. I think he's better in the clinch. I think he has better hands. I think he has better boxing. He has better Muay Thai. Yeah, just overall, I think Njoku's a way better fighter. I think he should probably be even bigger favorite than he is currently. So yeah, Kennedy Njoku, probably one of the easier picks on this card. I think he gets it done really easily. First two rounds, probably the second round though. I think that, the first round might be a bit of a feel-out process just because it is heavyweight. They're bigger guys. So, but I am going Njoku. Let's go Njoku by knockout. Let's go second round. Probably he'll catch him with some knees to the body, hurt him, and then kind of just fold him, get a TKO. Next up, we have a rematch between Clay Guida and Chase Hooper. Now, I say rematch because they actually grappled each other, and I believe Chase Hooper submitted him really, really quickly. I think it was like 50 seconds or some shit. I think he heel hooked him. I'm pretty sure he heel hooked him. I know it was a leg lock. It was either a knee bar or it was a heel hook. I think it was a heel hook, though. Chase Hooper, massive favorite coming into this fight. I get it. Like, I think Chase Hooper should definitely be a favorite. He is on a roll. Let me get some water. He is on a roll. Chase Hooper. Clay Guida, obviously older in his 40s now. Longtime vet. Has fought pretty much everybody at 155 and even a lot of people at 145. But, man, he's too old, man. And I think Chase Hooper's going to submit him again. I just don't see any real path that Clay Guida can win this fight. Clay could take him down. Like, Clay could definitely take Chase Hooper down. Once the fight hits the ground, I just don't see Clay Guida avoiding either being submitted or swept and put in a shitty position at some point. And on the feet even, I think Chase Hooper has improved quite a bit on the feet. He's still not some, world beater striker. Neither is Clay Guida. But on the feet, I kind of favor Chase Hooper too at this stage of their careers. If this fight happened, well, first of all, this fight couldn't have happened 8 years ago because Chase Hooper would have been like fucking 16, 17 years old or whatever the fuck. But anyways, if this were like a 2014, 2015, maybe even a 2016 version of Clay Guida, I think he probably could beat Chase Hooper. He probably could just, be the more physically strong guy and take him down and kind of avoid the submissions and control him enough to win a decision. But this isn't, this is the 2024, almost 2025 version of Clay Guida. I think he's going to get submitted pretty similarly to how he got submitted in the grappling match. Probably going to be the first round. I don't know if it'll be a leg lock this time, but we'll see, man. But yeah, I got Chase Hooper by submission in this one. They're throwing him a name, an old vet, you know, that he already beat in a grappling match, and they're rematching in MMA. So I'm going Chase Hooper by submission, probably first round. Clay Guida's notorious for fucking shooting in takedowns and getting caught in guillotine, so I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. But yeah, I'm going to go Chase Hooper by submission. So moving on up, we have Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin. I'm kind of back and forth on this one. Chiesa, you know, when he had the layoff and he had some injuries, he is a bit older himself. Let me double check. I think he's like 36 or 37. He's 36, so he's 36 years old now. To be fair, Max Griffin is also older. Max Griffin is 39, so he's actually older. But Max Griffin, in my opinion, out of the two, has aged better. You know, Chiesa seemed to have a real big fall-off point because when Chiesa first moved up to 170, he actually looked like a contender. He was ragdolling the fuck out of pretty much everyone he was fighting, and then he ran into Vicente Luque, and then got caught and submitted himself, and then ever since then, he just hasn't really seemed to be the same. I know he had some back injuries, and he hasn't really fought a whole lot. Just looking at Chiesa's recent record here, you know, he when he first moved up to 170, really good run. He submitted Condit, you know, an older Condit. He ragdolled the fuck out of Diego Sanchez. Again, you know, these are older guys, kind of past their prime, so they aren't the best wins. There's name value there, but they're not the best wins in terms of when he beat them. However, he did dominantly beat Rafael Dos Anjos, and he also dominantly beat Neil Magny. Those are two decent wins, especially the RDA one. You know, in hindsight, that's a pretty good win. The fact that he was able to ragdoll the fuck out of RDA is pretty impressive. But again, I just don't think that's the same Chiesa. You know, the Chiesa now is not that Chiesa we saw then, because that was in 2020, early 2020. So, and then he beat Neil Magny after that, and then, like I said, he got submitted by Luque. He lost to Sean Brady, although the Sean Brady loss in hindsight is actually not that bad, because while Chiesa did get kind of dominated the first two rounds in the grappling, in that third round, man, Chiesa fucking almost came, like he actually almost came back and kind of won. He took Sean Brady's back, had him flattened out, was hitting him. And I'm going to be honest with you, man, if that fight was a 5-rounder, it wasn't, but I'm saying if that fight was a 5-rounder on that night, I honest to God do think Michael Chiesa would have ended up finishing Sean Brady, because Sean Brady was fucking gassed. Like, he had nothing. And Chiesa had his back at the end of that third round. It looked like he was almost going to get a TKO or a rear naked choke, and then the fight ended too little too late. He ended up losing a decision, rightfully so, because he did get dominated the first two rounds. But like I said, man, in hindsight, that's really not that bad of a loss, because Sean Brady is, right there at the top of the division with the big dogs at this point. So in hindsight, not the worst loss in the world for Chiesa, especially considering he almost came back and fucking won. But then after that, he did fight Kevin Holland and looked awful. I mean, he looked awful against Kevin Holland. It straight up looked like he just didn't want to be in there. He looked super tentative, almost afraid to get hit at all in any of the exchanges. He took a horrible shot, like a horrible takedown attempt from the outside, got stuffed easily, and then pretty much immediately got Darce choked. And just wasn't a good look. But most recently, he fought Tony Ferguson and fucking destroyed Tony Ferguson, took him down, took his back in like 2 minutes, and then submitted him with a rear naked choke. It's really hard to gauge, that performance, because Tony, obviously, as we all know, is on a fucking, 7-8 fight losing streak at this point, and I think the longest losing streak in the history of the UFC, and is just a complete shell of his former self. So even though Chiesa's, not the guy he used to be, it's kind of hard to gauge where he is based off of that win, because there's probably a lot of guys in the UFC that could do that to Tony Ferguson at this point. Even the lower ranked guys could probably do that to Tony. So it's hard to really gauge that. But he is fighting Max Griffin. Now, if we look at Max Griffin's recent record, he just beat Jeremiah Wells by split decision, which is actually a pretty good win. Close fight. You could argue he lost that. And before that, he lost to Michael Morales by decision. He actually had some success in that fight in the third round, but overall he still lost. Before that, he beat Tim Means by split decision. Before that, he lost to Neil Magny by split decision. Before that, he beat Condit. He beat Kanan Song, Ramiz Brahima, and then I don't want to go too far back into his record just because I feel like once we go past or below 2020 into 2019, 2018, I feel like those fights, it's kind of hard to really take those into consideration because it was so long ago. But he has fought a lot of good people. Max Griffin, just to name some off the list. He's fought Chidi Ejukwani, he's fought Colby Covington, he's fought Elizeu Zaleski, Mike Perry, Curtis Millender, Thiago Alves, Alex Morono, Cowboy Oliveira, Ramiz Brahima, Kanan Song, Condit, Magny, Tim Means, Morales, and Jeremiah Wells. So, I mean, he has a lot of experience, and he has been a lot more active than Chiesa has in recent years. He is older. He's 39 years old. But again, Max Griffin, in my opinion, performs better at 39 than Chiesa was at like 35, 36, like Chiesa's been performing the last couple of years. So I don't want to look too much into the age here. Again, really tough fight to pick. I believe Chiesa is a slight underdog. I think Max Griffin is a slight favorite. I will say this. I'll say this. Chiesa, if he's on and he's on his best day, I think he is the better fighter, and I think he does beat Max Griffin. But fuck, man, it's just when Chiesa's off, man, he's really off, and it just borderline looks like he doesn't even want to fight. And that's the problem with me is Max Griffin, win, lose, or draw, Max Griffin is one of those guys that he's going to show up and he's going to do everything he can to win. And look, he might not be the best guy, and he does have a lot of losses. In fact, most of those losses on his record are to the better guys of the division. I'm going to name some of Max Griffin's losses. Michael Morales, not a bad loss. Neil Magny, Cowboy Oliveira, Alex Morono, Thiago Alves, Curtis Millender, and Elizeu Zaleski and Colby Covington are all the bigger names that he fought, and he lost all those fights. Now, granted, some of them were close decisions, like the Thiago Alves fight, the Cowboy Oliveira fight, the Neil Magny fight, were all pretty close decisions that, you could argue he might have should have won, but tough fight to pick, man. Tough fight to pick. I'm back and forth. I've spent a shit ton of time on this fight. But I think I'm going to go Chiesa, man. I'm going to trust, because I firmly believe Chiesa on his best day is a better fighter than Max Griffin. And I'm going to trust that after that last fight against Tony, Chiesa's maybe got a little more confidence back. And I don't know. I'm going to go Chiesa by decision here. I think he's going to be able to use his clinch, use his length, his size to be able to kind of get those body locks, take Max Griffin down just enough to be able to win a round or two and win a decision, maybe 29-28. But certainly I wouldn't be surprised if Max Griffin just shuts out Chiesa, if Chiesa just no-shows and kind of loses a pretty easy 30-27 decision just based off Max Griffin being the more active striker. That certainly would not shock me. But I am going to go with Chiesa. I have to go with Chiesa just because, I feel like on Chiesa's best day, he's a better fighter. To be honest with you, I don't think Max Griffin would beat RDA even now. I don't think he would beat even current old RDA. I think RDA would win. And look, Chiesa fucking dominated RDA. And again, that was a while ago. MMA math doesn't always work, but I just feel like when Chiesa's on, he is a better fighter than Max Griffin. So I'm going Chiesa. But again, Chiesa sometimes no-show, so it's hard to say. So I'm going Chiesa by decision here. Moving on up, we got Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. I'm going Joshua Van. Cody Durden, both of these guys just fought real recently. Cody Durden fought Matt Schnell in September, and he submitted him in the second round, caught him with a ninja choke. And then before that, he fought in July against Bruno Silva, and he got knocked out. And Joshua Van, he's also fought recently, twice actually. He fought Charles Johnson in July, That was his first loss in the UFC. He got caught, TKO'd with that uppercut, and then after that he fought Edgar Charez in, was that the Sphere card? That might have been the Sphere card. It's September 14th. Won that fight. That fight was actually a fucking war between Joshua Van and Edgar Charez. Joshua Van won it. Van, very good boxer, very, very tough. Very, very tough. He's got some power in his hands. Good boxer, like I said, puts it together well. Lots of forward pressure. But his defense isn't the greatest. He does get hit quite a bit. And also he is open to low kicks and things like that on the feet. Cody Durden, though, he's not really much of a striker, to be honest with you. He's mostly a grappler, wrestler. He's going to try to take you down, clinch you up. Outgrind you, and then possibly look for a submission if the opportunity presents itself. He'll look for a sub. So very different stylistic matchups between how the last couple of fights Joshua Van had. He was fighting mostly strikers. Although Charles Johnson can wrestle and grapple, he was fighting mostly strikers. And Cody Durden is not a striker; he is a wrestler grappler. So interesting matchup. Kind of tough to pick, but I am going to go Joshua Van. Cody Durden is a bit older. Van is young, and I feel like Van will be able to land the strikes more and possibly get a TKO, if not a decision. Although, kind of tough to pick because we don't quite know how good Van's grappling defense is and some of those positions against a guy that's been doing it a long time like Cody Durden. But I am going to go Joshua Van by decision. So moving on up, we got Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. This fight got rescheduled. I picked Chris Weidman before, and I'm going to pick him again. I just feel like he is overall better than Eric Anders, and I feel like, especially with the wrestling, that's going to be the big difference here. So I'm going to go Chris Weidman by decision. I do think Anders is going to be tough enough to last all 3 rounds against an older Weidman. Weidman, if he was younger, I think, again, he probably destroys Anders first or second round, gets him out of there either by submission or TKO, but older Chris Weidman. So I got Weidman by decision. I already did this fight on a breakdown, so I'm not going to really go through too much. Moving on up to, okay, now is this the undercard? Okay, no, this is the, I think this is the main, no, okay, no, this is still the undercard. All right, so we got Randy Brown versus Brian Battle. Tough one to pick again, but I'm going Randy Brown. Brian Battle, I think, is a 2-1 favorite. Let me check. Brian Battle is... Where are the odds? So, yeah, Brian Battle is the favorite. Most people are picking Brian Battle. I'm going to go with Randy Brown, though. I think Randy Brown, this is going to be a striking match. Both guys can grapple, but neither of them are really... too great with their offensive wrestling. So I think it's going to be pretty much a striking match. And Brian Battle, I feel like he has, he does a little better when he's moving forward, and it's more of a, a brawl kind of, and more, there's more aggression. But Randy Brown doesn't really fight like that. He sticks and moves. He fights behind his jab. He fights behind his straight, his teeps, his leg kicks. And he uses a lot of footwork and angles. And I have a feeling that's going to give Brian Battle some trouble. Brian Battle, he can kick. But again, most of his offense is from his hands and him moving forward and him pressuring. And I think Randy Brown is going to be good enough and lanky enough and rangy enough to be able to move out of the way and avoid the big shots and kind of just pick Brian Battle apart from the outside. Tough fight to pick, though. Brian Battle has not fought nearly as many good people as Randy Brown has. Randy Brown has way more high-level experience. And I'm going to count on that one in this one. So I'm going to go Randy Brown by decision here. Going to be a close one. I think it's going to be real close. But I just see Brian Battle having a hard time getting past that reach and that awkward movement and constant circling that Randy Brown does. And I think that might frustrate him a little bit. So I'm going to go Randy Brown by decision here. Moving on up, we got Movsar Evil versus Aljamain Sterling. Probably for the number 1 contender fight at 145. Movsar, I think, is a 3-1 favorite, 4-1 favorite. And, he is undefeated, but Movsar is one of those guys where he's just kind of scraping by in his wins. None of his wins are really shockingly impressive. They're just him doing enough to get by on a decision. And also, stylistically, I think this is a tough matchup for Movsar because I don't see him being able to control and out wrestle Aljo the way that he has most of the guys he's fought at 145. Aljo's a really, really high level grappler, very good wrestler himself, and I just don't see Movsar, manhandling him. And frame wise, they're both 5'7". It's not like Movsar's like fucking, 5'11" at featherweight, a huge featherweight. He's not really a big featherweight at all. And I'm going to go Sterling with the upset here. I think Sterling's going to be able to be the first person to beat Movsar. I'm going to go by decision. Again, Movsar is good enough to avoid getting submitted, in my opinion, or trapped like on the ground and TKO'd in a bad spot. But I don't think he's as good of a grappler overall as Sterling, and I do think Sterling can possibly sweep or out-scramble him and find his way on top in the grappling positions and control Movsar enough to get the win here. So I'm going to go Aljamain Sterling with the underdog and the upset here to win by decision. Again, Movsar is going to be able to do enough defensively not to get finished, but I still think he's going to get out-controlled in the grappling in this one. So I'm going to go Sterling by decision. Moving on up, we got Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo. Themba Gorimbo is taking this fight on short notice, replacing Nick Diaz. Luque's looked pretty awful, ever since the Jeff Neal fight. He obviously had that brain bleed and then some time off, and he did beat RDA after that. Didn't look the greatest, looked okay, and then he looked awful in his last fight against Buckley where he kind of just got taken down and then immediately turtled up and got TKO'd. It was really weird fight. I'm going to go Themba Gorimbo. Themba's on a roll. And Themba's also one of those guys that fights very smart and strategic and based off his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. And I think Themba's going to be able to stay on the outside, avoid getting caught with those big low kicks, and then use his jab, use his straight punches to kind of be the quicker guy, quicker to the target, and then mix in possibly some grappling and some clinching and just do enough to get a decision here. Possibly a finish. It just depends on how Luque looks. Maybe Luque looks terrible like he did against Buckley and just isn't the same guy anymore and he gets finished. But I'm going to go Themba by decision here. I just feel like he's very good at game planning and very good at following the game plan depending on who he's fighting. Again, on a roll. He is younger. Luque's a bit older now. Had the brain bleed. Time off. So I'm going Themba Gorimbo by decision here. And yeah, so moving on up, we got Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith. I'm going Dominic Reyes by first round knockout. Anthony Smith, I think, is pretty much at the end of his career. He's looked terrible in his last fights. He looked awful against Roman Dolidze, a middleweight who was fighting up at 205 on short notice, just completely dominated Anthony Smith. His only win in recent years was against Vitor Petrino, and that was kind of a fluke where Petrino shot in for a takedown real early and basically put himself in a guillotine and got submitted. I think if that fight happens 10 times, I think Petrino wins 9 times. And then outside of that, he beat Ryan Spann in the rematch. Probably should have lost that fight. He did win the first fight by submission in the first round. But Anthony Smith really hasn't looked all that good, probably since like 2019, 2020. And I just don't see that changing. Reyes, on the other hand, obviously had that losing streak. But if you look at who he was losing to, it was literally, let me just pull up his record. It was pretty much like the champions at the time of the division. So he lost to John Jones. Most people, including myself, thought he won that decision. And then after that, he lost to Jan Blachowicz, who was the champ. Yuri Prozga, who was the champ. And then he lost to Ryan Spann. Now, the Ryan Spann was the worst one of all because he got knocked out with a jab in the first round. And Ryan Spann is obviously not on the level as the guys I just mentioned. So that's a bad loss. But then he came back, 2 years after that, fought Dustin Jacoby and absolutely destroyed him and looked really good. Looked fast, looked powerful, and looked like he kind of had, his confidence back. And just stylistically, I think it's an awful matchup for Anthony Smith. I mean, Anthony's way slower. He's not really as durable as he used to be. His wrestling and grappling isn't good enough to be able to take Reyes down and control him and submit him. So there's really no way I see Anthony Smith winning this fight. So I'm going to go Dominic Reyes, first round knockout. I think he's going to really destroy Anthony Smith. And I think the speed's going to be the biggest difference here. I just don't think Anthony Smith can, go punch for punch and strike for strike with Reyes. he's just going to be way too slow. So I'm going to go Dominic Reyes, first round knockout. Moving on up from the prelims to the main card, we got Nate Landwehr versus Doo Ho Choi. Tough fight to pick, but I am going to go Doo Ho Choi. Nate Landwehr gets hit too much. He is one of those guys where you do kind of have to put him out cold in order to win, because he is kind of like a zombie. If you hurt him, it doesn't really matter if you hurt him. He's not going to turtle up and fold or quit. He's going to keep going and keep going and keep going, no matter how bad you hurt him. So he is one of those guys that is, you're kind of nervous if you're picking against him, because, again, he's just so tough and so durable, and he doesn't ever try to stop winning the fight, no matter how much he's down or how much he's hurt. So he is, one of those guys that's tough to pick against. But Doo Ho Choi, I think, should be the slicker striker. He will be faster. He will be the harder puncher between the two. The only concern really is Nate Landwehr being able to, clinch a hold of him and possibly get a takedown and start to wear him out. Or if Doo Ho Choi hurts Nate Landwehr really bad and then doesn't finish him and then kind of gasses himself out, Nate Landwehr could come back and win this fight. But I think Doo Ho Choi, the time away that he's had and some of the losses that he won his last fight, looked great. I just think Doo Ho Choi is on a bit of a different level technically than Nate Landwehr is. Especially on the feet, and I do think Doo Ho Choi is going to be able to get Nate Landwehr out of there. I'm going to go Doo Ho Choi by second or third round TKO. I do think it's going to be a war. I do think Nate Landwehr is going to test him, but I don't think he's going to win. I think Doo Ho Choi is going to win. He's going to be able to land the strikes again, be quicker. Similar to the Reyes-Anthony Smith fight, except for closer, just because Nate Landwehr doesn't really quit, and he just goes for it all the time, whereas Anthony Smith, we've seen him kind of, reserve himself to losing a decision by basically accepting certain positions in the fight, and Nate Landwehr is not going to do that. But I still think Doo Ho Choi is going to be the quicker guy. And I'm going to go Doo Ho Choi by TKO on this one. So moving on up, we got Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. Bryce Mitchell, huge favorite. I don't really get the odds here, just stylistically. Both of these guys are grapplers, with Kron Gracie being an actual world-class grappler. Bryce Mitchell is a very good MMA grappler. Both of these guys, not really much of strikers, although Kron, he could strike a bit, and so could Bryce Mitchell. He did drop Edson Barboza, but outside of him dropping Edson with that left hand, we haven't really seen much from Bryce Mitchell in terms of his striking. We did see Kron Gracie go 3 rounds with Cub Swanson and actually kind of hold his own on the feet a little bit. I mean, he was definitely getting outworked and outstruck, but he was landing his own shots, and he is pretty tough and durable. And then we saw Kron fight Charles Jourdain, and he looked awful in that fight. Couldn't get a takedown, couldn't get the fight to the ground, and got outstruck on the feet, and didn't show the same willingness to really go to war on the feet in that fight as he did in the Cub fight, but it's hard to gauge with Kron, how he's going to look. Bryce Mitchell coming off that horrible KO loss to Josh Emmett. He got flatlined. A lot of people thought he died the way he fell, and how he was stiffened up after the fact. But this is his first fight back since that KO loss. It is a safe matchup in terms of, not taking concussive damage, because Kron Gracie isn't, again, not a striker and certainly not a power striker the way that Josh Emmett is, but still a tough fight, I think, for Bryce Mitchell, because, he's not a striker, so his only 2 options here is he could try to take Kron Gracie down, which he probably will be able to, because I do think Bryce is the better wrestler, but once the fight hits the mat, it's like, that's kind of like 50-50 or even like, 60-40 in favor of Kron. Kron is a world-class grappler, so, that's not really a picnic. Even if Bryce Mitchell gets a top position or gets a takedown, that's not really a safe spot to be necessarily if you're Bryce Mitchell. Like it is in most, fights that Mitchell has at featherweight, he's going to be the better grappler once he gets on top. This might not be the case with Kron. And then the only other option for him would be to stand up with Kron. And again, both of these guys are not very good strikers, so it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if Kron actually outstrikes Bryce Mitchell on the feet. Especially since Mitchell's coming off that, KO loss, he might be a little bit gun shy and hesitant on the feet. So these odds are way too wide in my opinion. I would, favor Bryce Mitchell, and I am going to pick Bryce Mitchell because, again, I just feel like, he's probably going to be good enough to be able to get the takedowns and avoid getting submitted and do enough to control Crone on the ground. And then on the feet, it's tough to pick. But I am going to go Bryce Mitchell by decision here. Again, these odds are way too wide, and Crone Gracie is not a bad underdog because, again, stylistically, this is just one of those fights where either guy could possibly win it. So moving on up, we have a rematch between Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. I'm going Ciryl Gane. I just don't see what's much different from the first fight. The first fight was a 5-rounder, and Gane won all 5 rounds pretty easily. It's striker versus striker. Volkov's grappling is not good enough to be able to take down Gane. And so you're going to be seeing a striking match again and again. Volkov, he's too stationary. He doesn't move around enough. He doesn't really move his feet too much. He is very good at picking guys apart from range that stay in front of him, but that's the thing. Gane does not stay in front of you. He's constantly moving, circling, switching stances. And I just don't see anything really changing from the first fight to this one. So I'm going to go Ciryl Gane by decision again. I think he's going to win all 3 rounds, 10-9. Pick him apart, do what he has to do to win each round. So I'm going to go Ciryl Gane. Easy win here. Easy rematch. Kind of a weird matchmaking. But heavyweight's, a thin division. So, sometimes you're going to see these situations. But I'm going to go Ciryl Gane by decision. I think it's a really easy fight. Nothing's really changed since the first fight. So moving on up, we got Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Gary. I actually think I'm going with Ian Gary. I think Shavkat, I know he's 18-0. I know he has 18 finishes. Ian Gary, 15-0. He's had, some closer fights. But stylistically, man, I think Ian Gary is actually a pretty bad matchup for Shavkat. Shavkat's not the greatest offensive wrestler. He can get takedowns, but he's not like one of those guys where it's like, guaranteed that he's going to get a takedown, right away. Kind of like, Gilbert Burns when he fought Wonder Boy or Belal Muhammad. Those guys were taking down Wonder Boy much easier than Shavkat did. It took Shavkat like over a round and a half to be able to finally take down an older Wonder Boy. And I just don't think his wrestling is all that great. And he's got good submissions. He's got good finishing instincts, obviously. And then on the feet, he is pretty good. He's got good offensive boxing. He's got good offensive, striking from the clinch with his knees and his elbows. And, he is tough. He's durable. But I don't see him really controlling Ian Gary on the ground for a long, extended period of time. I could maybe see him getting a submission in a scramble, like a guillotine, if there was a takedown and then Ian Gary goes to get back up to his feet and maybe gets caught in the guillotine and gives up his neck for a second. I could see that happening. And I could also see Shavkat possibly hurting Ian Gary with a shot on the feet, maybe in the clinch, up close with like an elbow or something. But I don't know, man. I think Shavkat's a little overrated. I know he's 18-0, but defensively he's not very good. He keeps his head right in the center line, doesn't really move his head. Doesn't really move his feet all that much, gets hit quite a bit. And, again, not the greatest offensive wrestling, so it's not like he's one of those guys where, he makes you hesitant to strike against him because you're so worried about getting taken down. Like, like against a Belal Muhammad, for example. Like, Belal's not the best striker in the world, but his wrestling is good enough that it makes other good strikers hesitant to really open up because they're so worried about getting taken down. I don't think that same thing is there with Shavkat because I don't think his wrestling is that good. So I think Ian Gary's going to be much more comfortable on the feet in this matchup than he would against somebody like a Belal or even a Gilbert Burns. So I'm going Ian Gary by decision here. I think it's going to be a close one. I think Ian Gary is going to get the upset. And the footwork is going to be the big difference here. I think Ian Gary, the fact that he can circle around and move around so much and he can kind of keep you at the distance and pick you apart from range is going to be the difference. And defensively as well, Ian Gary, I think, is much better defensively than Shavkat is. Shavkat, to me, in this fight, he has to make it as grimy and dirty as possible with the clinch up close, dirty boxing, trying to work trips, trying to, grab a hold of his neck to, look for a guillotine, things like that. That's how Shavkat's going to win this fight. But I just don't see him being able to do that against Ian Gary. He moves too much, and He's too mobile, and I think Ian Gary's going to kind of pick him apart in, probably kind of a boring fight over the course of 5 rounds. So I'm going to go Ian Gary by decision here with the upset. I think it's a tough fight stylistically for Shavkat. So moving on up to the main event, we got Alessandro Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. Kai Asakura is making his UFC debut, fighting for the title right off the bat. Super rare. I think the only times off the top of my head that's happened would be Gilbert Melendez when he fought Ben Henderson, but Gilbert was also a defending, Strikeforce lightweight champion, so that's a bit of a different situation. And then the only other time I think was Joe Soto when he fought TJ Dillashaw, but that was, like literally a day's notice, and Joe Soto was already scheduled to fight on that card against somebody else. And then Barral, I think, passed out during his weight cut, got pulled from the fight, so they put Joe Soto in there against TJ in his debut for the title. So that's the only time I can remember that happening, 2 times off the top of my head. Tough fight. Kai Asakura is good on the feet. He is explosive. He's got some power at flyweight. Also kind of rangy, too, for a flyweight. Pantoja, we know, what we're going to get when he fights. He moves forward, throws power. Not the greatest defense, but he is very durable. And he's also one of those guys that just keeps pushing no matter what. Even if he gets tired, he will keep looking for takedowns and top control and power shots. And I'm going to go Pantoja here. I'm going to go Pantoja by submission in this one. I think he's going to probably have to get through a couple of tough first rounds. First couple of rounds, I think Kai Asakura will be the quicker, sharper guy on the feet and will be able to land those shots. But then I think Pantoja is going to be able to, eat those shots. He's going to be durable enough to kind of wear Kai Asakura down in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. Eventually get those takedowns in the later rounds, get top position, and then I think he's probably going to end up being able to get a submission, probably a rear naked choke. He's going to take Kai's back, I think probably 4th or 5th round, and be able to submit him. This is a big step up for Kai Asakura, UFC debut on a pay-per-view for the title. You're kind of asking a lot for him in this situation. And I think it's too much too soon for Kai Asakura. So I'm going to go Pantoja by submission late in this fight. I do think Kai will make it interesting in the first couple of rounds with his striking and his dynamic movement. But I just think the grappling is going to be the big difference here in the championship experience that Pantoja has. So I'm going to go Pantoja by submission. Let's go 4th round. Probably 4th round, rear naked choke. I think he's going to be able to finally get him out of there. So, yeah, that is the UFC 310 pay-per-view. Let me review it real quick. Go over it. Bottom to top. So we have Kennedy Njoku. We have Chase Hooper, Chiesa, Joshua Van, Weidman, Randy Brown, Aljo, Themba, Reyes, Duho Choi, Bryce Mitchell, Cyril Gane, Ian Gary, and Pantoja. Those are the picks here. Let me pull this out, go full screen. Yeah, so those are the picks for UFC 310. Maybe I'll do a post-fight breakdown on the card. We'll see. But, yeah, that's UFC 310, and I will see you guys next time.